Hello and welcome to As the CMMC Churns. I'm Matt Titcomb from Peak InfoSec. Peak InfoSec is an authorized CMMC third-party assessment organization, and I am also a CMMC certified assessor. And so we're going to carry on in understanding security requirements. We're going to jump into the audit and accountability domain and talk 331 system auditing. Now, we're doing this one because the real problem child we'll talk about in the next churns is actually 333, review and update audit logs. So let's jump in. So again, we're going to start off with key definitions around this, around the core security requirement about that creating and retaining of your audit logs. Well, right off the bat, what is an audit record? Well, an audit record is an entry in an audit log related to an audited event. Gotta love NIST. They love circular definitions. They don't define things. So let's go figure out what an event is. Well, an event is an observable occurrence in a system. Okay, I log in. That's an observable event. It now is an audit record, and which then gets us to audit log. Well, that's the chronological. Now we're adding time. We're tracking these. And now we're getting a little bit more specific about system access, operations, things that are going on in your environment. Now, associated to that is the general term log. That's a record of all the events within your systems and networks. Everything. So that's what we're talking about here. Again, when you're working through the security requirements and the assessment objectives, go to the NIST definitions. Don't try and interpret these off of anything else. As assessors, this is what we're looking at in our interpretations too. So when it comes to discussion, there's a lot of in here. So let's kind of start off with the first part. 331 is originally written. The original context of this is actually coming out of system design for custom developed software. So, for example, when I worked at the Air Force Academy, the system we worked on, it was a custom developed platform. Granted, we got lots of log events from Oracle, and from Red Hat, and from other systems that we used. However, for the custom developed application, we had to define the application type logs. Oracle only went so far. So we had to create additional ones that we wanted to monitor and control. But the core thing in here is that, what we really want to know comes all the way down to the third paragraph is what is the content and the sources amongst all of your system infrastructure needed to identify unlawful and unauthorized activity. Now, most times with audits and things like that, logs, you can never gather too much. You always want it because when you need to find out what really happened, the more detail you've got, the better off you are, but there's a balance of you don't want debug logs, so you want to kind of run to the normal optimal settings that most vendors in their setting up of logs typically handle for you. Now, last thing is they do recommend NIST SP 892, which is absolutely obsolete. So that was written in 2006. To give you context, Splunk was formed in 2003. Splunk did not get into audit log record reviews until after 2006. So the whole concept of a SIM and everything else that we're doing still didn't even really exist yet. That time frame, we're doing a lot of this manually via Excel. So yeah, that's the challenge of this type of technology and what we're talking about here. Audit log sources were very much platform specific and viewable in platform or just generally dumped off and done in Excel. Now, the primary requirement use case of this one, if it is custom software, we've already hit this, you need to identify the unauthorized activity that is not provided by the COTS sources. What would be an indicator of compromise? So you're asking that for what you're writing on top of everything else. If you're just using COTS sources, what COTS sources need to be captured and what are the specs to identify unauthorized activity? Now, many of these, you've got the commonly known event log types, entries within Windows that are indicators of something going on, and they're very commonly known. But you need to know the entire log. You need to make sure it all works, right? And then the other core use case in this is, does the selected or created log sources work? Now, inherent in that is, well, once you've got them, how long are you retaining for them? And that work is how long you're retaining stuff. So we'll get into that in a minute. So when it comes to actually understanding this requirement in context of the other ones, 331 actually is fundamentally preceded by 341, your requirement to establish and maintain your baseline configuration. Yes, this is a part of 341. 341, again, is very broad, covers everything fundamentally. Now, likewise, when you get into this, where it really starts to come from is actually 313.2. This is a part of your architectural design and system engineering principles. Now, if you are doing custom software development, that software development techniques kicks in here. Again, this is that part where 313.2 is meant to be a guiding function of what you're doing. It's fundamentally why when you go back to SP 892, again, that obsolete log, that would be one of the sources you would cite and point to this. Now, 331 actually does in turn feed into 333, review and update logged events. Likewise, 331 feeds into 314.6, where you are actually looking for indicators of compromise. Yeah, so let's be clear. 333 is not meant for identifying indicators of compromise. This is not where you go and audit log reviews. We'll talk about this in another understanding the requirements. Now, when we look at the assessment objectives, they're pretty straightforward. You need to give us a list of all the audit log sources. What do you need? How are you maintaining them? To identify what is unauthorized activity. What should the content of each audit log source be? And then likewise, we need to make sure you're doing it. And then does the audit log source generate actually have the content you need? Now, we've seen this in real worlds and implementation. We've set up firewalls like Palo Alto. Great, that's an audit log source. It's generating logs. We're sending it to the SIM, and the SIM isn't getting anything. Oh, audit logs are being created because we can see the timestamp and they match, but they don't contain the defined content. Fail. That's the logic we're looking for here. Then we're looking for the implicit ODP approved, hint, hint, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, for how long you're going to retain your audit records. And then the real question is, are you retaining them? So let's kind of walk through these for what we're looking for from an evidentiary point of view. So from an examination point of view, for A, B, and E, we are looking at your system design documentation. Fundamentally, we're looking for a list of your audit log sources and their specifications for what works. Now, these are places you may find that. Most time, what we find is it's interesting. It comes 333 actually has the best one. It's a list of audit log sources. And then A, B, and E are also then, well, what are the settings? Again, this is the specs. What should it be? And we'll walk through that in a couple examples. And then the supplemental artifacts are actually your audit logs and records and auditable events. Now, when we walk through this, for example, this is our approach that we use for our assessments and we use for clients. We use a SharePoint list to generate a list of all the audit logs and all their sources. So we've got the top one, audit logs, pretty easy. And that's coming from Microsoft Azure. And you can see in the fourth column, there's a hyperlink. Well, that hyperlink actually then is the log source specification from Microsoft of what the content is of the audit logs table. And you can see the attributes, you can see the columns, so we know what it should be when it's created and it's populated. So that's primarily what we're looking for A is going to be the list. And then Bravo is the specification of the log content. Now you'll see two other columns in here, the criticality and log failure indicator. This is how we track and identify for 334 alert in the event of audit logging process failure. Now, audit log retention is a little bit easier. Again, you've got to have your approved ODP. You can see this was created originally on 31 July and updated to the template that you see in front of you. This is the screenshot from Azure Sentinel showing that we are configured to retain audit logs per the ODP for 180 days. And if we run this query in Azure Sentinel, and we did this just before creating this churns, you'll see that the audit log entry with the lowest time generated stamp is from 12/14/23. Okay, well, let's just do a little public math using Excel. If I take away 180 days from today, and we're recording this on the 11th, that now makes it December 14th. We're perfect. So let's sum up. 331 is all about the system design of your audit log sources. A list of all the audit log sources for each and every component that you're bringing in, the specification for each of those audit log sources that you're tracking, and then be able to demonstrate things are working. And then it's also about how long you're going to retain your audit log sources. This is fine. If you don't retain for specific things, you can actually have multiple settings in here, and that's fine. Again, ODPs are not meant to be singular. You can actually have multiple. You just have to approve them. And then fully documented. If you do this right, 331 can be an examination only. Again, that's up to you guys on how well you do this. And again, thanks for joining me for another episode of As the CMMC Churns, and we hope this helps you guys with your audit log sources.